Hi everyone, so this is my first video of studying for my AP Gov exam, and I'm just making these videos for myself, just so that I can listen back to them and help me study. So to start off, we'll be starting with Unit 1. So we're going to start off with Enlightenment, which is influenced by the European intellectual movement from the 18th century, and it influenced a lot of the American framers while they were writing the Constitution. The framers borrowed ideas from the Enlightenment and used these principles of government to develop the American Constitution. Natural rights. Natural rights are the rights people possess by natural law. They are apart from the government and they cannot be taken away by a ruler or government. Popular sovereignty is the power to govern in the hands of the people. Republicanism, or a republic, is people electing leaders to represent them, and they create laws in the public's interest. The separation of powers helps keep a government from becoming tyrannical because it's separated into many parts so that nobody has too much power. We see the concept of separation of powers in the United States government when looking at the three branches: the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judicial branch. The idea of limited government prevents tyranny from forming, as effective government has power distributed among many members, each with ability to check the powers of the others. So this kind of just helps the government stay regulated and preventing one person from getting too much or too little power, and it kind of just creates fairness along the government. We can find multiple types of enlightenment in the Declaration of Independence. For example, we can find social contract, popular sovereignty, and the natural rights in the Declaration of Independence. It connects to the idea of popular sovereignty, meaning the government gets power from the people's consent. Now for the types of democracy. The first type of democracy is participatory democracy, which emphasizes broad participation in the political processes by most of, or if not all, members of society. It can be seen in the United States Constitution in the First Amendment freedoms of speech and press. So for elite democracy is more limited participation in the policymaking of the assumption that government is complicated, and therefore the most educated people need to run it. Now for pluralist democracy, which are groups of people who associate themselves with interest groups who compete to influence policy. So for some examples, for pluralist democracy, there are interest groups. For example, the NRA, which is the National Rifle Association. You could find this in the United States Constitution, in the First Amendment, freedom of assembly, allowing political parties and interest groups to flourish. Some examples of elite democracy would be primarily seen in the Electoral College, where citizens vote, but they are voting for electors who really vote for press. And you can find elite democracy in the United States Constitution, as it is elected reps legislate on behalf of the people. Our founding documents support these different models of democracy, as the Congress can be an example of the elite, as it is elected reps legislate on behalf of their people. The First Amendment, freedom of assembly, is an example of pluralist, as it allows political parties and interest groups to grow. And the First Amendment, freedom of speech and press, is an example of participatory, as it allows people to express their opinions. Now getting started with our required documents. We will begin with Brutus I, which challenged a broad participatory model. It feared the curtailment of personal liberties reflected in a larger republic like the U.S. The main argument for Federalist 10 argued so many competing factions in a large republic, liberty would be upheld by their competition. And that is an example of pluralist. And the main issues between the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists are the ratification of the Constitution by the states, which is what it was concerned by, especially on the issue of majority rule versus minority rights. In Federalist 10, James Madison defines factions and explains a role of a large republic as he is concerned about mischief of factions in a republic. Madison presented two solutions of the issue of factions. 1. Take away the cause of factions, and 2. Try to manage their effects. He argued double protection against tyranny of factions, which is 1. Separation of powers in the federal government, and 2. Sharing of power between the state and the federal government. Factions are groups of people who believe in their interests are more important than any other interest. In Brutus I, the author's main concerns about a large and diverse republic are, he argued, dangers of the large centralized government, argued a large centralized government couldn't represent the views of the people because it would be largely separated from them. The Anti-Federalists disliked the Necessary and Proper Clause and the Supremacy Clause specifically because they felt that they allowed too much power to flow to the federal government. Two ways of dealing with the problem of factions are take away the causes and control the effects of the factions. The problem 1 would be give all people the same opinions and interests, and problem 2 would be destroy freedom that creates factions. Under the Article of Confederation, the United States government was very weak, and the state government were very strong. This is in relation to living under tyranny in a monarch for so long. There were many problems of the Articles of Confederation, which include only one branch of government, the legislative, no press, executive, and no federal court system, no powers to tax, no way to enforce state participation, and no power to raise an army, no money to pay army. People realized that the AOC needed revision when two events happened. There was the inability of Congress to pay its bills and the inability to put down a local insurrection, which examples Shays' Rebellion. Now on to the Constitutional Convention. The convention was called to revise the AOC, but ultimately an entire new constitution was drafted. There were two plans, beginning with the Virginia plan. Okay, so for the Virginia plan, the congressional representatives should be apported by population, and big states equals more representatives, which equals more power. Northern states would stop importation of slaves and not count enslaved people as portion of population. It would be elected by popular election. Now for the New Jersey plan. Each state is representative equally, and one vote per state. Small states have a disproportionate amount of powers. Southern states count enslaved people as portion of population, and southern states continue importation of slaves. The compromise was the Great Compromise, which also founded bicameral Congress. Bicameral means House of Representatives and the Senate. The House of Representatives are people represented by population, and the Senate is 2 votes per state. This also founded the 3/5 Compromise, which would mean 3/5 of enslaved people would be counted towards the represented. Slave import clause 20 years after the Constitution was ratified, the enslaved trade would end. This also helped found the Electoral College, which is each state given a number of electors that corresponds to the number of congressional reps that they have in the House. State legislators have all the power to decide who these people are. Now, I'll see you guys in part 2 to begin focus on the branches.